Have you ever wondered why you feel so heavy on your shoulders, even when everything seems fine? Why anxiety comes without warning? Or why sadness sets in even on days when the sky is blue? Most people believe that these feelings are personal weaknesses, an internal problem, a manufacturing defect, something that needs to be fixed urgently. But what if this pain is actually a legitimate reaction to the world we live in? Emil Durkheim, one of the fathers of modern sociology, viewed human suffering from a broader perspective. For him, no one suffers completely alone, because no one lives isolated from the collective. Each individual carries within themselves the reflections of the society in which they live. And when this society becomes ill, it is natural for symptoms to appear in people, not as guilt, but as a sign, not as a mistake, but as a warning. Modern society is built on values such as competition, performance, image, and productivity. From an early age, we learn that we need to be someone, to achieve, to show off, to prove ourselves. We are told that happiness is a goal, success is an obligation, and comparison is a yardstick. But almost no one stops to ask, what if this race has no end? What if we are on the wrong path from the start? That's where the pain begins. Not because you're weak, but because you're at odds with a structure that demands too much, listens too little, and gives almost nothing in return for so much effort. People don't get sick just because of biological or psychological factors. They get sick when they're forced to live in realities that don't respect their rhythms, their emotions, their stories. Durkheim called this anomie, a state in which social values no longer provide direction. Norms contradict each other. Connections are broken. One looks at the world and no longer sees meaning. One lives but does not feel alive. One acts but does not feel that one is achieving anything. One exists but is adrift. And then comes the silent doubt, could it be that I am the problem? This question eats away at millions of people every day, but maybe the answer isn't in the mirror. Maybe it's in the environment, in the noise, in the pressures you're trying to withstand. Maybe you're not broken. Maybe you're the reflection of a system that's lost its balance. And if that's true, and Durkheim believed it was, then the pain you feel isn't failure. It's lucidity. It's your soul's cry for a different kind of world. This video, this channel, this journey, it's not about blaming you or fixing you. It's about looking at what you're feeling with new eyes. It's about realizing that when everything around you is falling apart, your suffering doesn't come out of nowhere. It comes from a desperate attempt to stay whole in a broken world. Imagine being in the middle of a city that is collapsing, buildings cracking, sirens wailing, people running aimlessly. But no one acknowledges the disaster. Everyone is still smiling, posting selfies, and saying that life is beautiful. You, on the other hand, feel the chaos. You hear the cracks, you see the rubble forming, and then you think, I'm the problem. This is how many people are living today. Feeling the pain of what society refuses to acknowledge, Emil Durkheim, observing social phenomena at the end of the 19th century, realized that individual crises often reflected profound structural changes. He saw that when institutions, such as family, religion, work, or community, were weakened, human beings became ill, not because they had less value, but because they lost the support points that sustain mental, emotional, and even spiritual health. Pain arose not only from individual loss, but from the rupture of the collective fabric. Durkheim studied suicide as no one else had. In his most famous work on the subject, he showed that suicide rates rose not just among the depressed, but among those who were disconnected from group life, lacking a clear sense of belonging or direction. And this led him to a powerful conclusion. Pain can be a social symptom, not just a personal illness. Now think about our times. Social media offers what seems like connection, but it generates comparison, loneliness, and exhaustion. The logic of the market demands that you always be available, productive, and optimistic. The idea of community has been replaced by bubbles, faith by performance, and lasting bonds by instantaneous and disposable interactions. When all of this comes together, it creates fertile ground for anomie, the state of disorientation and emptiness that Durkheim so aptly described. You feel like you need to always be okay, but you don't even know what okay means anymore. You feel like you're falling behind, but you don't know who's ahead. You feel like you need to be more, but you don't know exactly what. This confusion, this tiredness, this anguish, these are not signs that you're failing. They're signs that you're aware, that unlike the world that numbs itself with distractions and ready-made formulas, you still feel, you still wonder, you still want meaning. And perhaps that is exactly what the current system does not want. People who stop, who observe, who reflect. Because reflecting generates clarity, and clarity questions, and questioning can lead to change. Durkheim knew this. That is why his work was so disturbing, because it said in no uncertain terms that it is not possible to live well in a society that disintegrates bonds and ignores the pain it itself produces. Suffering is not a sign of weakness. It is a radar that is on. An alarm that sounds when the soul senses that something is out of place. The question is, will you continue trying to fit into a model that hurts you, or will you start listening to what this pain wants to reveal? There is a silent trap that repeats itself every day. When something goes wrong, the finger always points at you. Are you tired? It's because you don't know how to organize yourself. Are you sad? You lack gratitude? Are you anxious? Maybe you're lazy or dramatic. The system has built a relentless narrative that everything depends on you, but this is not a truth. It's a strategy, a way to keep you trapped, guilty, and distracted from what's really happening around you. Emile Durkheim warned that society creates standards and norms that often oppress the individual. These norms become so natural that no one questions them anymore. It's like breathing polluted air and thinking the problem is in your lungs. When a society values only performance, success, and image, anything that deviates from this standard is treated as a personal failure. This is how collective pain becomes private shame, and this serves the system perfectly, because an individual who blames himself, who feels inadequate, who believes that his suffering is a weakness, does not demand change. He tries to adapt. He buys self-help books, signs up for productivity courses, tries to wake up earlier, breathe deeper, meditate better, all of this to try to fix himself. Meanwhile, the world around him continues to be overwhelming, unequal, and inhumane. But he does not see this because he is too busy trying to improve himself. It's an engineering of guilt, and it starts early. Children who cry are called too sensitive. Young people who question are treated as rebels without a cause. Adults who get tired are labeled failures. Instead of investigating the social, emotional, and spiritual causes of these pains, society prefers to label and silence. And the result is an army of wounded people who believe that the problem is always internal. But Durkheim offers us another perspective. He tells us that suffering can be the symptom of a structure that has ceased to offer meaning. That individual anguish is often the reflection of a collective moral failure. When values cease to make sense, when bonds disappear, when goals are unattainable, human beings become ill. And this illness, instead of being treated with empathy, is treated as guilt. How many times have you felt bad about not being able to keep up with the pace of the world? How many times have you felt like you were behind the times, that you needed to be stronger, more productive, more positive? All of these pressures didn't originate within you. They were placed on you. They were programmed to make you believe that if something is wrong, it's your fault. But what if it's the other way around? What if what you're feeling is a sign that you're still connected to something real? You were not made to adapt to chaos. You were made to sense when your environment is becoming toxic. And if it hurts, it may be because your soul still refuses to adapt to the unacceptable. Have you ever noticed how the world is full of noise and at the same time completely silent when it comes to what really matters? Information everywhere, endless stimuli, promises of success, self-help, productivity gurus. But deep down, something essential is missing: belonging, purpose, real connections. And it is in this absence that emptiness appears, a hole that cannot be filled with likes, goals, or praise. A hole that grows when everything around you demands movement, but nothing offers direction. Emile Durkheim drew attention to this over a century ago. He stated that when social ties are broken, human beings lose their bearings. They no longer know who they are or what they seek. And it's not because they've lost faith in themselves. It's because they've lost faith in the collective. A society that values performance more than affection, capital more than dignity, control more than listening, is doomed to produce exhausted, insecure, and emotionally adrift individuals. The concept of anomie, central to Durkheim's work, is exactly that. A state in which the rules that once guided ordinary life disappear or clash. There is no longer any clarity about what is right or wrong, desirable or absurd. What is important today may be disposable tomorrow. What is valued now may be a source of shame next year. This disorients the individual, and what is left is a confused feeling of inadequacy and failure. You look at life and feel like you're living in a scenario where nothing is solid. Relationships are fragile, spiritual bonds are superficial, work is unstable, promises are empty, and yet they expect you to be happy, to keep your cool, to post pictures of yourself smiling, to say that you're living your best life. But the truth is that you're trying to find meaning where almost everything has become appearance. This emptiness is collective, and so is the pain it causes. Millions are experiencing the same anguish, albeit in silence. Many look around and feel out of place, as if they were out of step, as if everyone else were understanding something that only they didn't. But this feeling of exclusion is, paradoxically, one of the most universal elements of today's society. Everyone is feeling alone, together. Durkheim saw the reconstruction of meaning as a collective task. For him, what sustained human beings was the strength of social bonds, those that connect us to something greater than ourselves, a community, a faith, a shared value. It is not about going back to the past, but about recovering the idea that human beings only recognize themselves as such when they encounter others. And when this encounter disappears, what remains is estrangement from oneself, from life, and from the world. If you feel like you're losing yourself today, it may be because you've been disconnected from what really matters. And that wasn't your fault. It was a gradual, systemic process, fueled by false promises and unattainable ideals. The emptiness you feel isn't yours. It was built around you. But the fact that you're realizing it is already the beginning of the rebuilding. We have reached the most important point. What now? What to do with all this that you feel, with this heavy conscience, this persistent emptiness, this feeling of not belonging anywhere? The answer may not be simple, but it needs to start with a crucial gesture. Stop blaming yourself. You are not weak. You are not broken. What you feel is real, legitimate, human, and more than that, it is a coherent response to an incoherent world. Emil Durkheim taught us that individual suffering can be a reflection of a collective crisis. And not only can it be, it almost always is. When society collapses in silence, people scream inside. And these screams manifest as anxiety, depression, fatigue, confusion, hopelessness. But remember, this does not mean that there is no inner pain, that everything is society's fault. It means that what you feel has roots, that it did not spring from nowhere, that there is a social ground on which your pain stepped before it reached you. And by acknowledging this, you're not playing the victim, you're becoming aware. You're seeing through the fog, you're freeing yourself from the guilt that the system has placed on you, so that you never have the time or the strength to question what's really making you sick. Healing does not begin with easy answers or ready-made formulas. It begins with clarity. It begins when you say, "This is not just mine." It begins when you give yourself permission to feel without shame, without hiding. When you understand that pain, far from reducing you, can reveal you. It shows that something inside you is still alive. It still pulses. It still resists the collective anesthesia that turns us into performance machines. Durkheim was not just a thinker, he was an observer of the collective soul. He knew that, even in the face of social ruin, there is a way out. But this way out is not individualistic. It is not in the idea of every man for himself. It is in rebuilding bonds that remind us of who we are, in reclaiming the human gaze, the sincere embrace, the true listening. It is in relearning to live with, and not just alongside, people. Maybe you are surrounded by voices telling you to be stronger, more grateful, more efficient. But today, perhaps the true act of strength is to allow yourself to stop, to breathe, and to recognize the world is falling apart, but it is not your fault. It never was. And this is not an invitation to passivity. On the contrary, it is an invitation to the most profound and transformative action that exists: to see clearly, feel courageously, and live truthfully. Because when you understand that pain has greater causes, you stop mutilating yourself trying to adjust, and you start to walk more lightly. Not because the world has improved, but because you no longer carry alone the weight that has always been everyone's. You are waking up, you are seeing, you are feeling. And that, in this deaf and blind world, is already a revolutionary act. If this video made you take a deep breath, if it brought you clarity, relief, or simply the feeling that you're not alone, then please leave a like. This will help this message reach those who need to hear it. And if you feel like this journey is just beginning, subscribe to the channel. Here, you will find content that connects emotion, society, and consciousness, because understanding the world is also a way of healing. See you in the next video.